Hey guys, what's up? Everelia here. This is a PTR preview guide of the general-nazgrim encounter in Siege-of-orgrimmar. This is not a formal guide, it's just a brief introduction to the mechanics of the fight and how we handled it on PTR. This could change before it goes live, so do bear that in mind if you're watching. The fight involves several different types of adds and a rage mechanic that you can control. At the start of the fight, he starts with a ton of adds around him, and they barely have any HP and they don't really add anything to the fight other than inflating the DPS meters for AoE classes like me. There's 4 different types of adds that spawn at set points throughout the fight. You always get the same adds spawning at the exact same times every pull, it's not random. So the 4 types, there's the Iron Blades, which are basically warriors. They'll chain cast a Blade Storm ability. They also have a Last Stand ability, which means you need to quickly burn them down once their health gets low, because that's when they'll cast it. You've also got Archweavers, which are basically mages. Now they'll blink around the room from time to time, and they have 2 casts. One is Mage Strike, which is basically Flame Strike, and this does damage in a small area, and the other is Arcane Shock. Now Arcane Shock deals 150k damage, and for every time it is cast, the mob that cast it gains 25% damage. So this stacks up really quickly and means the Archweavers get very deadly very quickly if you allow them to cast. Next is the Assassins. Now these are stealth when they enter the fight, but they can be revealed by a Hunter's Flare ability if they're put in the correct location. Assassins will fixate on a random target and melee them, and if they can get behind the target, they'll use Backstab for 500k damage. On PTR they can crit as well, which means they can burst you down really quickly. Now as long as you face towards them, they can't backstab you, and you can also kite them if you're low on health or suffering from other effects of the fight. Finally are the War Shamans. Now these can cast Healing Tide Totem, which puts a totem on the ground. Any mobs that are within 3 yards of this totem will be healed for a lot of their health, 30% every 3 seconds, and this affects the boss as well. So if the totem gets dropped next to the boss, he can basically heal his health back up to full in a couple of seconds. So you need to be very careful with where you're tanking the War Shamans, and when they do drop their totems, they need to be quickly moved away from them. They'll cast a Chain Heal that can be interrupted as well, and they can also cast an Earth Shield which can be dispelled. All of the adds are susceptible to snares, roots, stuns and interrupts, although these do have PvP durations. You can reliably kite assassins, for example, if they're on you, and you can keep Archweavers stunned until they're dead. You can also death grip them all, which is pretty useful for killing the War Shamans when they drop a totem, because you can immediately death grip them as soon as the totem's dropped, and that means they won't get any ticks from the healing. Our preferred kill order was War Shamans, then Archweavers, then Assassins, and then Iron Blades. The Iron Blades are not dangerous at all, and could even be off-tanked for the entire fight if needed. The Archweavers are very dangerous if not properly stunned and killed quickly, and they may even end up being higher kill priority than the War Shamans as long as you can keep them interrupted properly. Adds begin spawning in waves of 2 every 45 seconds, and then increase to 3 after 6 minutes. The boss himself has a rage mechanic. Various mechanics in the fight cause him to gain rage, and he can use his rage to use special abilities. He'll always use the ability that consumes the highest amount of rage, and he can only use a rage ability once every 15 seconds. That means that however much rage he gains in that 15-second cooldown will determine what ability he uses next. At 30 rage, he'll do a heroic shockwave, where he leaps on a player for 300k damage and sends fiery lines out from the impact point. For 50 rage, he'll make a banner, and when this banner is active, all the adds in the room are going to start generating rage every time they melee swing. The banner itself has around 2 million health and it can be killed. For 70 rage, he'll create a Ravager. Now this is a spinning axe that moves around the room. It will last for the entire fight, and if you go near it, you'll take damage, and the boss will also generate some rage. At 100 rage, he'll cast Warsong. This deals physical damage to the whole raid, and this damage is equal to 75% of your maximum health. He also has 3 stances that he'll switch between at set points throughout the fight. Battle Stance causes him to generate 1 rage per second. Berserker Stance increases his damage dealt and his damage taken by 25%, and his rage generated by 100%. A defensive stance causes him to take 25% less damage, but he'll also deflect all attacks from the front, and every time you do attack him, he'll gain 5 rage. This means that if you attack him during defensive stance, you'll do less damage and cause him to gain rage very quickly. Attacking him in Berserker stance will cause you to do increased damage. He also has a Sundering Blow ability, which is a tank debuff. Now this does damage to the tank and reduces their armor and its stacks. And in addition to that, he'll gain rage every time he casts Sundering Blow and gain additional rage for each stack on the enemy. So this means you need to tank swap in order to keep the stacks low. Now unfortunately, this means that tanks that have high amounts of avoidance, example Brewmasters, are massively preferred for this fight, because if they can dodge even one of the sundering blows, the boss is going to gain so much less rage that it just becomes a lot more manageable for the entire fight. Finally, he'll use Bone Cracker randomly, putting a dot on a random target for 30 seconds and reducing their health by 50%. Now if you have this debuff, then most other attacks such as Heroic Shockwave or the Assassins or the Arc-Reavers will one-shot you. Now apparently you can stand in melee range of the boss to prevent being targeted by Shockwave, although this isn't confirmed. And if you have this debuff with an Assassin, you'll want to kite it with slows and roots as much as possible. Now overall this fight is about managing the boss's rage. He has a tightened rage timer of only 9 minutes, which means you'll probably need to keep DPSing him during his defensive stance, and you may also want to off-tank all the Iron Blades. His Warcry isn't actually that deadly as long as your raid has a big cooldown available and any Arc-Reavers or Assassins are appropriately dealt with. So if his rage is over 70, it's a good idea to push it to 100 to prevent your room getting filled up with Ravagers, which are much more difficult to deal with. The fight does seem very overtuned for normal mode and will probably be nerfed before it goes live.